SpongeBob has seen a bit of a resurgence lately, and that's interesting because SpongeBob is straight from my childhood. We're talking about SpongeBob the Cosmic Shake today. This is the latest game from THQ Nordic, and it stars our friend SpongeBob in his latest adventures through Bikini Bottom. This is a very similar kind of game to Battle for Bikini Bottom, which was remastered very recently, so it's still fresh on my mind, but let's take a look at what makes this game unique.
Hey, SpongeBob, what does it mean when it says, "Only those of innocent heart may"?
The first thing you're gonna notice in this game is that there's an absolute huge amount of SpongeBob set pieces. All the characters you've known over the years are there, represented properly, the voices are very close, and they stick to their character through and through. That can be very positive or very negative if you're annoyed by the show. Back in my day, we all loved SpongeBob, so this was very welcome to jump into, and it has that charm to it. When it comes down to the gameplay, however, it's not anything I haven't seen before. It's very similar to Battle for Bikini Bottom in that it's a 3D action platformer, and that's sort of all there is to say about it. There's a huge amount of cutscenes in between what you're doing, and that's really what the entertaining draw is here. Just to get invested into that world again and enjoy the characters you like. The platforming is very satisfying, mostly because of exploration. You are settled with these kind of small zones at a time, but as you progress through the story, some of the zones get larger and different wacky scenarios. There's a whole world devoted to karate, and if you're a fan of the show, you know that's where it gets wacky, but the kind of puzzle solving is quite basic. There was no real time where I thought, how do I do this? It was more of a trial and error, get your way through. How do I get up to that building? Well, you'll figure that out if you're getting used to the controls. And the controls are an interesting subject, actually, because in addition to a double jump, you get a grappling hook and you're able to swing around, and you can do the karate kick, as it's called, and again fly through different objects, and that opens up the world more and more as you go through. And interestingly enough, you can backtrack with those new abilities and find all the collectibles, the things that you may have missed before.
Am I? I stayed up all night pretending I had hands.
The other half to the gameplay is going to be the combat. Now, again, very basic. This is not going to hit you with a slog of very hard enemies or anything like that, but each enemy has its own kind of quirk to it. You get these enemies that you need to kick to stun them, and then you're able to do damage. There's other enemies where you have to wait for them to swing, tire themselves out, and then attack, and it does a pretty good job of adding to these enemies as you go through and progress onto the different levels, the different worlds. There are some boss fights. Again, a little simplified, but it did kind of come across as a welcome change of pace, because again, some of these characters you know and love, well, you now have to face them down, and each boss fight seems to have its own mechanics associated behind it, its own little strategy. And I thought that was interesting, because it splits things up. You're exploring mainly, you're fighting secondarily, and then there's some boss fights to kind of cap off the experience. I thought that was great.
Oh, who am I kidding? I couldn't scare a baby right now. Without me ship, I'm just a pathetic ghost of my former self.
The main draw to this title, and the most important thing in my opinion, is the faithfulness to the series. And in that regard, I think it hits the nail right on the head. Everybody that you've known from the show is completely believable in their character, and some of those voices are just spot on. Whether that annoys you or charms you, that's another issue altogether, but they really did stick to the universe, and they found enough fun, enough freedom in the middle of it to make a very enjoyable game. My only criticisms really of this title are that it's just not very difficult, and that's a bit of a drag because I wanted that challenge to it. The challenge seems to be collect all of the things and get onto the finish line, and that's just fine, but I'm not certain that's gonna strike with everybody. If you're a fan of SpongeBob, I absolutely recommend this game. I'm there with a 7.5. I believe it's a little bit basic, but holds true to SpongeBob.
My audience demands colors and motion converging into visual conflict. We need crash, boom, bang, not yap, yap, yap. Now throw out the stupid script.
There's a script?
And action!